Today is Thursday, December 6, 2012. My name is Philip Laporte. I am the Director of the Labor Studies Program at Georgia State University. Today we are conducting an oral history interview as part of the Voices of Labor project that is administered by the Southern Labor Archives Special Collections Division, Georgia State University Library. The archivist for this project is Tracy Drummond, and I will be interviewing today a former international representative of the United Association, Mr. Tom Payne. Tom, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And welcome to Georgia State University.
Good to be here.
Tom, we want to begin by asking you about your upbringing. Where were you born? When were you born? And if you could tell me a little bit about your parents.
Okay. I was born in Cave Spring, Georgia, Floyd County, born in 1937. The youngest of 11 children. My dad and my mom, we were farmers. They farmed all their life. And I was raised with the other family members on a farm. And I graduated from a public high school at Cave Spring High in 1956. And after I graduated, I told my dad, he was still farming, I told my dad, I said, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I think I want to do something else. And he said, well, if you leave, you're the youngest, and if you leave, there's no way that I can continue to farm. I'll just have to retire. So I left anyway, and I went to work for the Coca-Cola bottling company in Rome, Georgia, and started out separating bottles from the different kind of bottles that they had, from Coca-Cola to Pepsi and whatever. And I did that for a while, but I got to thinking, I said, there got to be more than just this. So I decided, I said, well, maybe I need to go back to school. But during that time, I had an offer for another job with the State Highway Department, and I went to work there and worked for a little while. And then I had a sister that lived in Atlanta, and I got an interview for the Lockheed Aircraft, and I went to work for Lockheed Aircraft at Marietta and worked there. And you have a probation period time for 90 days, and then after 90 days, if you're still there, you can join the union. And that was my first personal exposure to a union, to a labor union. But however, they had a big layoff, and I didn't get to make it to the, beyond the 90 days. So I went back to Cave Spring, and one of my brothers was a member of the local union 766 in Rome, Georgia, of the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters. And I went to work with him on a project up in Somerville, Georgia, as just a laborer, helper, and working with them. And I was making just about, minimum wage at that time. And so working around them, I knew right then, that somehow, some way, I'm going to get into the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union. And so anyway, I talked to him about it, and he said, well, I'll see if I can help you. So I tried to get in the Rome, Georgia local union apprenticeship program there, and of course they weren't taking anybody. I had another brother that was in the local 72 in Atlanta, Georgia, and I had another brother that was in the local union in 43 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And so I tried all of those. Well, one day I got a call from Atlanta, Georgia, and they told me to come down for an interview for the Joint Apprenticeship Program. And so I was working with my brother in Ringo, Georgia, who was a plumbing contractor, working with him, doing labor work and helper work and operating a backhoe for him. But when I got that call, I left in December of 1958, came to Atlanta, went through an interview, got accepted into the apprenticeship program, and I was initiated in the local Union 72 United Association in June of 1959. And so I started working with different contractors, as an apprentice, going to school. And then when I finished up the school, when I finished up the program and became a journeyman, I was working on a place called Holy Family Hospital out west, just west of Atlanta here. And when I finished up that program and working there, I was offered a role to run a job, to do a job. And so I left there and went to Westminster and did a dormitory for the boys' dormitory school there. I did a job there. At the same time, now I'm still, even though I'm in supervision, I'm a member of Local 72. So I got this feeling that I wanted to run for an office. So I ran for the Plumbers Examining Board at Local 72, and that was in, I'd say around 1970. And I served on that, or maybe in 69 or somewhere along there. I served on that, and so while I was serving, there was a position, Financial Secretary Treasurer of Local 72. It came up for an election. So I decided that I would run for that position. And so I did. I ran for the position, and I got defeated in my first race in that office by just a very few votes. So then after that, I built a pretty good rapport with the members, and they seemed to like what I was saying and what I was trying to do. And so then I ran for the position that came available as vice president of the local union.
Okay. Let me just stop there and back up for a minute, Tom.
Okay.
I'm interested in your getting in touch with the plumbing and pipe fitters as a career path. By my rough count here, I've got 1, 2, 3 Payne brothers who went into the craft. Is that correct? Were you the 4th brother?
No, I was the 5th.
The 5th?
I was the 5th brother. I have another brother that's in Local 72 now that's there. And I had another brother, there were 6 of us. I had another brother that was a member of the UAW and worked at the Ford Motor Company out in Hapeville and retired there a few years ago. And not only that, though, but I had other family members. I had 4 brother-in-laws that were all members of the labor movement, carpenters, IBEW 84, worked for the Georgia Power Company, and another brother-in-law that worked for the UAW and retired out of Detroit, Michigan. So, I'm around all these people that are in the labor movement, and you can imagine I wanted to follow where they had been and what they had done, because they talked about, how it was important to be in a movement, to be represented by someone that you could have the feeling of having a better way of life for yourself. And that's kind of what, got me going there. But that's how that kind of got started.
And you were the youngest of
Yes.
11 children.
Right.
So you were the youngest brother.
Yes.
And those other brothers went into the plumbing craft. And so that was your connection. You say growing up on a farm, your dad
Right.
wasn't a plumber, but
Was not.
one of those brothers blazed the trail.
Yes, and let me tell you how that happened. The oldest brother, John, who had the company in Ringo, Georgia, and for many, many years, he was working in Cave Spring as a laborer on the Georgia School for the Deaf. And there was a man that he became friends with that was a member of the IBEW. And then they became very good friends, and he in turn introduced him to another friend that was a member of Local 72 out of Atlanta. Now this has been many, 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 many years ago. And so he is the one that actually got started. And so He became a member, first of all, in Miami, Florida, after he went there first and then came back and became a member of Local 43 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And then the others kind of followed him. And then I followed, more or less followed them. But John, the oldest he's the one that actually got started. Mm-hmm. But because of an introduction to a friend, that mm-hmm. Working as a laborer or just a helper on a job.
And you began, as you say, as a laborer. And Tom, can you tell us about those initial experiences in terms of showing up on time, in terms of the tasks that you carried out, and did any of that contribute to your being accepted later to the apprenticeship program?
Yes, because one of the things that when I made the applications to the 3 different local unions, I kind of had an idea that, I'm going to be able to hit one of them, hopefully. And as it worked out, as it turned out, the Atlanta Local 72 was the one. But the thing about it is, what I learned early is that, and I learned this through working with my brothers, is, that you work hard, give 8 for 8, work hard, and if you really want to make it in this, make a good employee. And when you go down there to make an application with the background that you've got working with us, it can't do anything but help you, and it did. So when I go to the apprenticeship committee for the interview, they asked me kind of like what you're asking me. Why do you want to get in this? And then I tell them about my brothers, that they're in it, and that they like it because it's been able to provide a good way of life for them, a good living for them and their families, and it's having somebody to represent them in in negotiations for wages and conditions and all that. And so anyway, when I do that, then I think that helps me a lot.
Well, did the Payne brothers ever inform the youngest brother to make sure that you meet the standard, because we want you to uphold the reputation of the Payne name in plumbing?
Absolutely, because one thing about the Paynes, you can say a lot of things about them, maybe some negative things, but they were all good workers. I mean, they absolutely were good workers. Never had a problem, getting a job or keeping a job. So they were good workers.
Now, Tom, you and I were discussing your early career and how those Payne brothers had a reputation of being good workers. And the youngest Payne brother established his reputation showing up to work on time, carrying out the assignments he received, and were those early days as a laborer helpful in developing those job skills that you carried with you the rest of your working career?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was taught, and I believe that, if you are a good worker in like whatever it is, manual labor, then you're going to be good at any other thing that you do. So I kind of took that as something, that work hard and dedication, and I believed in that, and I still believe in that. And I taught my children that, and my grandchildren the same thing, Mm-hmm. And another thing, though, that I believe this, and I was taught from my dad and brother and everything, your word. You give your word. Your word is your bond. And if you say you're going to do something, you do it. And I always taught that it's just, there's nothing wrong with saying, that, well, maybe I can't do that today, but just let them know. And that's to me, that's good for anyone to follow.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tom, you graduated in the class of 1956.
Correct.
And then you began your apprenticeship in June of 1959, is that correct?
Correct.
And so there were 3 years' time where you had a variety of jobs.
Correct.
You've mentioned a short period of time at Lockheed, Marietta, Georgia, and working for a plumbing contractor, your brother's operation in Ringgold, Georgia. Were there any other jobs that you had during that time before you got accepted into the apprenticeship program with Local 72?
No, that was pretty much it. Those jobs that I had mentioned earlier, that was pretty much it.
And so 1959, you enter the apprenticeship program after successfully completing your interview. And was there any other testing procedure at that time for entry into the apprenticeship program?
No, other than what the procedures that they had at that time. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the apprenticeship committee had, yeah.
Yeah.
You had to take a test, and then after you took the test, you did with an interview, and that's how they did the selection. They selected so many for that coming year to go into the program.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about it is, I want to just one thing, Phil, is that prior to going into the apprenticeship program, I was able to go to work at least 6 months before I actually got initiated into the local. And the first job that I had was with a company out at Emory University. The very first job that worked under the plumbers and pipe fitters, Local 72. The very first job.
And do you remember what job that was, Tom?
Yeah, what we were doing, we were actually putting in the sprinkler system out in, the lawn sprinkler system. Working for one person. There was one man that was just, and I was his helper, and that was prior to getting initiated into the local union. And of course, after I got initiated into the local union, then you'll work for several different companies, different contractors over the period of time.
And the test you had to take, was it focused on mathematics? Did you have to demonstrate some proficiency in mathematics?
Yes, you did. And in fact, and that's even true today. And I tell every young man that contacts me, or a woman, I say, listen, be sure that mathematics is very important. I had a young man ask me the other day about getting into the program, and I said, well, mathematics is going to be, it's going to be something that you're going to need, and it's something when you get a test. And so I say, get as much of that as you can, and when you go there, you'll do okay.
And then later in your career, did you see how you had to learn particular formulas and apply that mathematics that you were tested for and demonstrated proficiency? Can you tell us about the application on the job?
Absolutely. When when you're going to school and when you say you're getting into the plumbing and pipe fitting industry, you never know really what you're going to be able to do. But going through the school, and by the way, I think one of the best schools at that time when I came in, and even today in this country, is the Joint Apprenticeship Training Trust out of Local 72 here in Atlanta. But what I did, I was able to take by learning there, and when you go into the job, for example, like doing different offsets, using and different numbers and figures to figure out how to make an offset to go to 45-degree angles, and even rolling offsets and things like that. And everything that you had to do pertaining to that industry, there's some math, there's some measurements that are involved that you need to take and have. So that was good. And I became not only that, I became a welder, a pipe fitter welder, and you do a lot of that in that, because everything is geared around making cuts at different angles and things like that. So that's very important to have that. And I learned a lot and was able to use it. And because of the skill that I was able to use, when work got a little slow here, I was able to go out of town to work because I'd had that skill I'd picked up here of like welding and pipe fitting, and worked on a powerhouse.
Now, Tom, you had mentioned that you had applied to several different local unions' apprenticeship programs, but some of them were not hiring. Can you explain to us the connection between job activity, jobs that are available and the number of openings in the apprenticeship programs?
Right. Well, yeah, it depends, on the work situation. Like in those instances I told about in the Rome, the work at that time it wasn't that good, and they had some unemployment. And so if they have unemployment, they're not going to take as many people. Now they will still take some. And the same way with Chattanooga, Tennessee, they just were not taking, that many people. And you could make an application, and an application they would hold it on file. And the thing about it is, and I probably would more than likely eventually gotten into either one of those places. But the one out of Atlanta came open first. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't too thrilled about coming to Atlanta. Raised in a small town, worked in Ringgold, Georgia, and we worked in and around Chattanooga some, but I wasn't all that thrilled about coming to Atlanta. But boy, when I got in that automobile, when I got that letter to come down for the interview, and I drove down here, went through the interview, and when I got started, I said, boy, I'll tell you what, this was the right move.
I'm curious, Tom, about your insights into investment in infrastructure, job creation, and the connection that has with openings in the apprenticeship training programs, in that we have a supposed skill shortage today, yet apprenticeship programs are not going to increase the number of students to train unless there are jobs to place them in.
Correct.
So your experience and insight into the importance of public investment in infrastructure that in turn is going to create job opportunities that are going to open more training opportunities to enhance our skilled workforce.
Absolutely. Because, see, that's just the way it is take this city, for example, now. For a number of years, that there was a lot of work, there was a lot of building going on, and a lot of, infrastructure and everything. And then, now it's it's declined some. It's in a decline. And what that does, that hurts all of the people that are coming out of school, for example, high schools, and that can't go to colleges and things. It hurts them having an opportunity to get into a trade because they don't have the work opportunities out there now. So it's important that for cities and for the government, that's a role that the government can play is to provide those opportunities through infrastructure, through like treatment plants and all kind of things that we need. And the population of this area, as I see it, is still growing. But yet the work in a lot of the areas is down, with the exception of in hospitals. Now that's still going on. But a lot of the industrial work is way, way down. And a lot of the commercial buildings is way, way down. So I think if anyone were to look at it and say if there could be some investment through agencies that could provide that, would be really down the road, a few years down the road, I believe that we're going to come up with a great shortage of skilled workers because of this situation that's happened now, because people now that are coming out of school, and a dad or someone will say, well, I don't think you ought to go there now. You need to go maybe to some other line of work. And what happens is you diminish that opportunity to get those people that are really good coming out of school, that I talk about are the higher caliber people, to get into the trade that will provide those good work for people down the road.
And so if Holy Family Hospital wasn't expanding west of Atlanta, if Emory University didn't need to put in a sprinkler system, if Westminster wasn't building a boys' dorm, Tom Payne may not have had the opportunity to enroll in the apprenticeship program.
Exactly.
So 1959, you're initiated, you're in the apprenticeship program, and you said that you spent 4 years in that apprenticeship program.
Right.
Can you describe the apprenticeship program, the training aspect, and then I want to ask you about the on-the-job aspect.
Right. The apprenticeship program is actually a 5-year program. But because I had worked with my brother and the others, I got a year, what they call a year's credit. And so when I was working, one of the jobs I was working on when I got that credit, I was working down at Conley, down at the Atlanta General Depot down there. And so when I got that raise, you get a little raise when you get the credit, I got 20 cents an hour raise. Wow. We're going to be able to do some things. Told my wife, I have got a raise of 20 cents an hour. Now remember, I started out at $1.65. So we're going to be making $1.85 an hour. So I got credit. So it's a 5-year program.
And your classroom instruction, do you recall some of the instructors or the specific curriculum? And was that in the daytime, Tom, or were your classes in the evening?
Classes were in the evening. Work on the job during the daytime. Go to school in the evening. And one of the instructors that I had that I absolutely believe one of the best instructors and taught me probably more about the trade was a guy named Pete Jordan. Pete Jordan was, at that time, he was a Fulton County plumbing inspector. That's what he did full time, and he taught school at night. And he was a member of Local 72. But this guy was really, I mean, he was a good teacher. He used practical applications and things to get you to think about things, and I learned a lot under him. There were other instructors that I don't want to take away from him, but Pete Jordan was one that just stood out in my mind. And then as far as a welding instructor, they had another guy there that was a guy named Ray Reed and a guy named Ayers, Pee Wee Ayers. They were great instructors in welding. They knew every welding procedure, knew all the different things. And when I went through school and when I finished up my apprenticeship school, I went back and qualified and certified on all the welding, like on the gas welding, the TIG welding, and arc welding. Now, I did that because I wanted to have more opportunities to work. And by doing that, that's why when work got a little slow here, I went to Rome on a powerhouse and was able to work. And get this, I went back to work for the brother that I started with in Summerville, Georgia. He was on this job, and this was in 1970. So we're talking about from like 50, 57, somewhere along there. And then I meet with him again in 1970.
1959 to 1963 were the years you were enrolled in the apprenticeship program.
Right. Actually, it turned out in just, I think it's the early part of 64.
And do you remember some of the jobs that you worked on during those times as an apprentice?
Yes. During the apprentice, I worked on it was a job, one of the first jobs after I left the job out at the Emory and put in the sprinkler system. I got to go to work on a job downtown. Was the Americana Motel, and probably outside of the Riviera, probably was one of the first hotels in Atlanta. Now, this was something that was, it was really something. So I got to go to work on that and worked on that for a long time, and then after that finished up, I left there and went to work for some other companies. Worked for a smaller company. I learned a lot at one of the smaller companies, and I worked there for probably not the biggest one. Biggest part of my apprenticeship program probably was working for a smaller company out of DeKalb County, a company called Genco plumbing and heating and air conditioning company. And the kind of work that we were doing that I learned a lot and probably learned the most was working on residential work. I learned a lot. And by doing that type of work, it enabled me to go to these other jobs and be able to do, and people, you know, that you work for could see that, you know, hey, this guy can do this pretty good. Because I had worked kind of, it's a one-on-one thing. Instead of like a big job, you work one-on-one with a person, you learn a lot. And I did that. So I worked for a smaller company, and worked on several jobs with the company, different houses and things like that.
Well, tell us, Tom, was it new construction, or was it existing residential homes?
Both. New construction and what we call service repair work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so what were some of the tasks that you did in those?
Well, some of the tasks,
residential-
like in the homes, we'd put in all the plumbing. And at that time, unlike today, it's cast iron.
Mm-hmm.
All the pipes are out of cast iron. And they were lead joints. You actually poured the lead in the joints to make the joints. Well, today they don't do that. They got PVC pipe and all that kind of pipe. But that's what we did. And then, like on service calls, you would catch any kind of a service call. You had plumbing stopped up, or you replaced, sinks, replace faucets, and do all kind of things like that in the service industry. So you caught a lot of it, really.
Were there any garden tubs or any of the exotic plumbing that we see today?
Unfortunately, no. These were what I call the typical little family unit, little bungalows. That you had one bathroom, maybe one tub. Which was a luxury, really. Coming off of a farm, no running water, no baths except outside. So when you work with these, people, that was kind of a luxury, even if you had one bathroom. And if you really were doing a job that had two baths, you were really doing something.
Yes. So this variety of experience at the Americana Hotel, I imagine there were hundreds of bathrooms which to work on.
Hundreds.
To a single-family residential job or repair work, etc. And then were there others? We talked about Emory, the Americana, and Genco Plumbing and Heating. Were there other jobs that you recall, or a particular contractor that stands out during your apprenticeship years?
Yeah, there was several companies that I worked for. One of the companies was a smaller company. It was called Georgia Plumbing Company, and the work they did was primarily small commercial work. And I went to work for them on Peachtree Road. There was a catering service out there, and they moved into an old house. And to renovate this old house to where they could have a catering, to food and all that stuff and preparation. And that was one of the most unique experiences I've had, because you got to tear out everything, and then you got to put it all back, And so it was quite an experience for me just to do that. And then later on, after they kind of finished up, and when contractor would kind of get slow on work, then you would be like terminated. But the good thing about it, in a building trades, particularly in our union, you get terminated from an employer. You get to go down to the union hall, you sign up, and you can get to go out to another company. Boy, I tell you what, that's pretty neat. So then I left there and I went to work for Cleveland Consolidated, which was a larger contractor. They're still in existence today. And I went to work for them on the Atlanta Gas Light Tower out here on Carolina out here. And I went to work for them and worked there for a long time. And between that job and worked at the Atlanta airport. Now this was not the airport, this was the kind of the first, I guess it was the first phase of the Atlanta airport And this has got to be back in like 60, I don't know, in the 60s. So anyway, worked there. And so after working there, I went to work for another company. And I worked at Lockheed, by the way, with Cleveland, with the same company. We were switched up to Lockheed and doing some work up there. And but the other company that I worked for, and I probably worked for a number of years. Now this is after I turned it. You're talking about during the apprenticeship program?
Yes, that's what we're
During the apprenticeship, yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the other companies that I worked for, they were some of the smaller companies. And then the company that I went to work for that I actually turned out under was a company called Lorne Plumbing and Heating Company, and they were out of Flint, Michigan. And the job that I got for them that I turned out was at the Holy Family Hospital. And I turned out there, and while I was working there, 1963, I was working on the job, and we got word that John F. Kennedy had been shot and killed. And I thought, and for me, I had seen during my early apprenticeship the years that work became very, very difficult to find during the Eisenhower administration. A lot of work, a lot of people were going out and working on silos and things. I'm talking about, the nuclear, bomb silos and things out west. Well, when John F. Kennedy came in, I thought, boy, I'll tell you what, and things began to look better. It began to be promising. And so when I heard that, I'll never forget what I was doing that day that I heard that. I was walking down to the mechanical room with the man that I was working. I had not turned out at that time. And got that word, boy, I tell you what, it was just, what a tragedy. But, I went on and then I finished up and then I turned out on that job there.
And so now you've turned out, you're a journeyman, you've completed your apprenticeship program.
Completed, graduated, yes, completed it. Boy, hey, look, and Phil, let's don't forget this. We're going to get a raise.
And Tom, was there a licensure exam
Yes.
that you took as part of turning
Yes.
out as a journeyman?
Yes. And see, I was a plumber by trade. And so in order to turn out, you had to take an examination with the city of Atlanta and Fulton County because they both had licensing. And so what you had to do, you had to go down and take a test. And in those early days, you had to wipe a lead joint as one of the requirements for turning out. Now, a lead joint is a joint. It's made up of lead. It's a stub, and what it does, it catches like toilets, sinks, and things like that. And what you do, you join a piece of metal with the lead, and it's solder, but you wipe it. You have to wipe it. And it's a very, you have to be pretty good. So you have to take that test plus a written examination in order to get your license to have a plumber's, journeyman license. And so that's what you had to do. You had to take an examination. Now you had to have that examination with the city and the county before you could turn out at the school. And I think that still applies today.
And so it's a verification of
Yes.
your knowledge and
Right.
your skills.
Of your proficiency in that particular, right.
And now, as a fully certified and licensed journeyman plumber,
Yeah.
what was the next step in your career progression?
Well, the next step is that I was working on the job, and the superintendent came by, and he said that I turned out like the day before and graduated. We had the school and all that stuff, and had a banquet and all that. So he comes on the job and he calls me off the side and he says, Tom, and he's got a set of plans. He said, Tom, now you just turned out. I said, yeah, I just turned out. He said, I want you to do a job. I want you to supervise a job. I said, you want me to do what? He said, I want you to supervise a job. I want you to take over and take these plans, and I want you to put this job in. I said, well, where's the job at? He said, he looked down from the Holy Family Hospital, and he looked down, and he said, there's going to be a house that's going to be renovated that the sisters, the nuns, are going to live in. And he said, what we're going to do is we got to renovate that, and we got to take everything out and redo it. And that's the job that I want you to do. And that's the first job, and I went down and took that, and I did that job. And when I finished up that job, he came to me and he said, and then I got another one I want you to do, and that's when I went out to Westminster.
And what contractor was this, Tom?
That was Lorne Plumbing and Heating Company out of Flint, Michigan.
And you were 26 years old?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'd say something like that. I'd have to kind of get my calculator out, but I'd say probably something like that.
1956 graduate.
Yeah.
8 years later would get us to 26.
Right. Yeah.
26 years old.
Yeah.
You have garnered years of experience.
Yeah.
Completed the apprenticeship training program.
Right.
Gotten your license.
Right.
Turned out, and now your contractor is asking you to supervise a job.
Right.
And so they started you out with the good sisters, and then it was on to Westminster.
Right.
And it is the Westminster School that we
Yes.
know today
Right.
in the Buckhead section of
Right.
Atlanta.
Yes.
So tell us, well, if there's anything else you'd like to add about making sure that the good nuns at Holy Family were taken care of. Were they praying for your success?
Well, I hope they were, because when I got the word, my reaction, for me, is that I'm under a lot of pressure, because I've been working on this job with other people, with other men on the job, and I've been doing pretty good, and they all like the work that I do. But now I'm going to go out and kind of on my own. And you feel a little pressure, And so whether they were praying for me or not, I don't know, but I was praying. And so anyway, I go do it, go do the job, and the job is, it gets done, and in fact, my brother-in-law, who is a member of the Local 72, he wanted to get into the apprenticeship program, and so then I kind of put a word for him to come up, and he actually started working with me on that facility, on that the sisters' house. He started working with me, and of course he later on turned out too. But then when I finished that up, then that's when I went to Westminster. Mm-hmm. And Westminster, now you got to remember now, Westminster is going to a bigger project. This is a dormitory for the. It was a girls' dormitory, so this is a bigger project. So I'm going to take that on in Beers Construction, and they're the general contractor. And by the way, they were the general contractor on the Holy Family Hospital. And one of the reasons that I got the job out there was a superintendent there named Jack Shrimpture. Jack Shrimpture, he, for whatever reason, I don't know, but he took to me. I mean, he just thought that anything he wanted done or anything, he would always come to me, and he recommended actually to my boss that I go do the job at Westminster, because he had a friend that was a superintendent out there. And I did, and I went out there on that job.
Let me just ask a bit, if I could, Tom. When you had that first supervisory job, did the job get done on time?
Yes, it did.
Was the job done to the satisfaction of the customer?
Yes, it was.
Was the people that worked under you, did they express confidence in your abilities as a supervisor to provide them with materials and instruction to get the job done?
They did not at first, because you got to remember, I'm young, I've just turned out. Now I got men that are working on this job that are older than I am, have been in this profession a long time. So here I am. I've just turned out, and I'm in charge of this job. But you know what? I was very patient about it, and I would consult with them. I kind of let them in on, this is not a me job, this is a us job. We're going to do this together. And sure, I'm going to be, in charge of it, but we're going to do it together. And those men absolutely bent over backwards to help me to make that a successful job. In fact, when I went to the job, the superintendent I had, Maurice Ross, he told me, he said, now if you go do this job, go do this dormitory job, he said, now they're going to start the stadium, the Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. They're going to start that job down there. And he said, so we've got that job, the same company's got that job. And if you go do this job, we will move you off of that job down to the stadium to work for the superintendent who I work for at Holy Family Hospital. And I said, okay, that's fair enough. I finished the job. Job came out good. Everything was good. Did everything. So he came on the job one day and he said, he brought another set of plans. Had them on his arm. And he said, Tom, you did a good job here. So I'm really proud of you. He said, now I want you to do the boys' dormitory. It's going to start right after this. And he handed me the plans. I handed them back to him. I said, Maurice, that's not the deal we had. The deal we had is I finished this job, I could get to go to the stadium. Because I wanted to go to the stadium. I knew if I went to the stadium, it would be a real experience for me, would be some overtime, and was going to be done within a short amount of time. I had to do it. And he says, you can't do it. I said, well, that was the deal we had. I said, if we can't do it, then I said, I guess I'm just not going to work anymore. So Johnny Morris, who was a superintendent at the Holy Family, Johnny heard about it. Johnny called me on the phone. He said, you be down at the stadium. Now, the job was already finished at Westminster. You be at the stadium in the morning. I said, yeah, but Maurice, he's the boss. He said, you be at the stadium. I went to the stadium and worked there on that stadium, and I was the last man to leave that stadium. I filled out the punch list and worked through that whole job and actually became in supervision under Johnny Morris. And one of the things that Maurice told him when I went down there, he didn't like it. He said, Johnny, do not let Tom have any overtime. The first Saturday, Johnny came to me and said, you were working Saturday. And I did. And I came into supervision, I helped Johnny in supervision. And I actually was there. I'm talking about when I liked everything to make sure everything was running. All the plumbing, all the heating, air conditioning, everything was going. I watched all the exhibition games. I'd never seen the Detroit Tigers. I'd never seen some of the teams that came in and that played at that stadium. Now, they didn't come. The Braves didn't get to come for sometime later. The Crackers actually played there. But I went through that job and worked on that job for that period of time.
Tom, how many how many workers did you supervise at the Holy Family job with the Nuns residence?
One.
And so
me and my brother-in-law.
and so then you moved on to Westminster to the
Westminster,
girls'
yeah.
dormitory.
Right.
And how many workers did you supervise in that position?
Probably had about 10 or 12.
Mm-hmm. So there was a significant jump in terms of your supervisory responsibilities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And now, and how long did the jobs take? The
Westminster or
the Westminster job.
The Westminster job. I'm thinking probably I'm thinking that it took about 6 months. I'm thinking it's about 6 months because it was not a large dormitory, but it was just a start for them, and I don't know what all they've done since then. I'm sure that they've added a whole lot, but it was not a lot. I think it's about 6 months.
Mm-hmm. And then from there, you
Go to the
moved
stadium.
to the Atlanta Fulton County
Fulton
Stadium.
County Stadium, boy.
You hit the big leagues.
In big leagues, we're in the big leagues. Atlanta's looking for the big leagues. Ivan Allen's looking for the big leagues, and everybody's excited, you know. And boy, I tell you what an experience, what a job that was absolutely done an unbelievable time. They did it. They came in here in 1 year. And boy, I tell you what a job. And of course, then I supervised a crew of people on that job there for the duration until we finished up. Now, a crew then consisted of about 10 people. But on that job, we had the total for plumbing and pipe fitting on that job. I guess we had over 100 people there on that job.
And was Beers the general contractor on
No,
that job? Who was
no. The company on that one was McDivitt Street was the general contractor.
And was Lorne Plumbing and Heating the
They were the
subcontractor?
contractor, yeah.
And so Lorne Plumbing and Heating provided you with several opportunities
Absolutely.
as you developed your
Absolutely.
career after you turned out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how long did you stay on the stadium job, Tom?
Well, approximately a year. Yeah, for the length time of the job. You know, I went there right after it started, so I'd say almost a year, yeah. I stayed there.
And the attention that stadium job got was so dramatic in that the leaders in Atlanta promised the Milwaukee Braves
Yes,
that they would have it ready for them.
for them.
And it was contingent, the move was contingent upon the stadium being ready.
Exactly. And, you know, the way the thing was being done, they had a superintendent there worked for McDivitt Street. He would come around and he would say to our, you know, like the plumbing, so we're going to pour concrete here in the morning. You better be ready. It wasn't no ifs, ands, or buts. We don't have enough personnel. And we don't have this. We're going to pour concrete there in the morning. You better have the plumbing underground and ready to go. So consequently, we'd have to work overtime and bring in a lot of people to load up on that one particular project to get it ready. There'll be a series of bathrooms.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so boy, you talking about hectic. And hey, they would pour concrete.
Well, how did the bathroom layouts compare? You went from the nuns' residence to the girls' dormitory to now all the plumbing for a stadium that was going to hold 60,000 people.
Quite a big difference in the plumbing arrangements for all the stuff, the stalls and things, you know, for the toilets and all the urinals and all the sinks and things. I mean, you can imagine if you go out and go to the stadium today, you can kind of see and get an idea. That was just about the number that they had back then, because it was quite a big difference. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you're now 27, maybe 28, and you've had 3 significant jobs supervising various projects with Lorne Plumbing and Heating.
Mm-hmm.
So once the stadium job was complete, did you continue on with another project with Lorne Plumbing and Heating?
Yes, I left that job, and then they had another job. It was a Cobb General Hospital up at Austell. And so Johnny Morris, who was he was the superintendent for Lorne on that job. Johnny, you know, I worked with Johnny and them, and I turned out under them. And there was a man called Mr. Hugh Casey, was probably one of the best what I call mechanics. The guy could do anything. I mean, he could do anything. He could lay out. He could actually. The only man that I ever saw that could actually read a square. I'm talking about. He was not educated, but he knew trigonometry. He knew geometry. The guy was just brilliant, and I worked under him and turned out under him. But they went to the Holy Family Hospital. Cobb General Hospital, and then I later followed up there, and then of course was Johnny wanted me to help him run the job, and I did, and I ran the plumbing on that job out there and stayed there on that job for 3 years at the Cobb General Hospital. Now that was something totally different now from what I'd been doing. You go from one thing, you go to another, and I'd never done any hospital work, and so it's quite a bit different, everything that's connected with a hospital. You got all kind of labs and things, and you got a lot of different kind of material that you use because of the different laboratories and things and testing and all that they do. So, but I stayed there for 3 years.
You had been at Holy Family Hospital.
Yes.
Did you have exposure to hospital setting there, or was it separate and distinct?
Well, it was separate and distinct. And this is that when I went to Cobb with Holy Family there, it was I wasn't that much involved in all the work that it was as I was with Cobb General. I was more involved because now I was kind of one of the key players in the things that we were doing. Whereas with the others, I was apprentice on the hospital. Mm-hmm. Turned out, but I'm not turned out very long that I'm moving and leaving mm-hmm. and going to do other jobs. Mm-hmm. But Cobb, I got the real exposure of the hospital.
And did that include beyond the plumbing and bathroom fixtures, as you say, the laboratory equipment and wet labs, etc.?
Right. Laboratory equipment, oxygen, vacuums, all kind of supplies, as to go to the different rooms and everything, that you walk into a hospital room and you'll see there where they have all the connections for oxygen and air and vacuums, all that stuff, plus all the other equipment that goes with it in the different, like for example, maybe the X-ray rooms would have different types of equipment. They would have a lot of the places would be like lead-lined walls, and behind those you'd have plumbing that would take care of that for, a lot of stuff you needed for cooling purposes and everything. So yeah, it was quite a bit different than what I'd been doing.
And operating room as well?
Operating rooms, yeah.
Specialty equipment?
All that, yeah, everything, yeah. Mm-hmm. And aside from the different, the different individual rooms that they would have, every room would have a toilet, and some would have a shower, and some would have, other fixtures or other plumbing fixtures and things. But in all the the underground water supply for it, you had to do all of that, and I was involved in all of that. All the sewer that's involved in the underground from the very beginning. I was at the very first stage of that, which I'd never done. You had to use instruments to do the grade. You had to to make how the ditch was being dug, and you give instructions, and you have to put up stakes and things, and it's what we call shooting an instrument. It's gives you the depth of where you are and where you're going and how far and how deep you got to dig, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That I was all involved in all that, which was I like that. Mm-hmm. I like that kind of work.
So in today's parlance, it was a greenfield operation, and then it was a brand new hospital?
Yeah.
And so it was from that new lot, new land, and so it had to go from connecting to the water supply.
Exactly.
To the finished
exactly.
plumbing installation fixtures.
Exactly. You had to go, you just got a piece, like you said, you got a piece of raw land. And you got to bring in the water supply from the street, which is, big, I'm talking about big water mains. And then you got to put in a whole separate sewer system, and everything. And it's quite a challenge to get all this in, and being as I was, I wanted to learn everything I could. And so I was given an opportunity to do that.
And were you running a crew there, or did your supervisory responsibilities increase in your time at the Cobb General Hospital?
I ran a crew there until we got to a certain stage, and then what happened, the superintendent, Johnny Mars, they pulled him off the job to go do a job at the over at Simpson Hightower, over at the school over there. I don't know where it was, the Martin Luther King school, but it was one of the schools over there. And then what they did, then they left me in charge to finish up the job, which I stayed on, like I say, running the job for probably another year after they left. And of course, then I was in charge of everything at that time.
And then how many personnel were you supervising at that time?
Well, and then I go from a foreman, just to having a crew of people. Then I go for the whole job. So like, you'd have like plumbers on the job at that time. We'd have like maybe 25 or 30, something like that.
And was the rest of the construction crew there part of a coordinated effort with plumbers and pipe fitters, Local 72, operating engineers, or
yes,
other crafts?
This job was a job that was which is not doesn't happen a lot today, but all the crafts on this job were union crafts. All the crafts. So you coordinated with all the others. You had operating engineers, you had sheet metal workers, you had carpenters, you had, of course, the laborers union working, and then you had the asbestos workers. You had all the crafts. And on a hospital, you usually would carry all the crafts. So you had to coordinate with the IBEW with all the crafts, and you got to be able to work with all of them.
So did they send the IBEW brother-in-law on that job because they knew that that was Tom Payne's brother-in-law?
No. Didn't do that.
Well, so 3 years. So this was the longest time you spent at one job site with one project at that time, up to that time in your career?
Yeah, that was the that would be the longest time for that particular job. Yeah.
And your responsibilities continued to increase,
right.
And you're responsible for the entire job.
Right.
And 25 to 30 plumbers were working under your direct
right.
supervision.
Right.
And you're not yet 30 years old.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So if we add those three, you were 29
right.
when you were
right.
had reached this point.
Right. Yeah.
And so if we can just look at the corresponding experience you were gaining as a member of Local 72. From the time you turned out, ended apprenticeship, turned out as a journeyman, they're now supervising 30 plumbers at a major construction project. During this same period, Tom, what was your involvement with Local 72? Were you a member? Were you
yes.
Participating
right.
in other positions?
I was an active member of Local
mm-hmm.
72 from the very beginning that I came into the local union. I attended all the meetings. I was involved in one of the first positions that I held during all this time that I'm doing all this work is I ran for the Plumbers Examining Board and got elected. And we were located then on 198 and a half Whitehall Street. This is really going back. That's so anyway, then I got elected that, and I served on that because I wanted to work with them, and I helped draw up and design the different drawings that they would take. Because remember, when a person came into the local union that had not been involved in an apprenticeship training program, it's people that we say that were journeymen that learned the skill somewhere else, then they would have to take a test to get into the Plumbers and Pipefitters local union. So on the examining board, we would give them a test, and it would be a written test and a drawing test. Have a blueprint that you draw in the plumbing diagrams and everything.
So the Plumbers Examining Board, that was a position that was elected from among the local union members?
Correct.
I see. And did the contractors have any representatives on that
No.
plumbing examining
No.
board?
No.
So it was solely for the local union
Correct.
to evaluate
Correct.
people that were coming in. I
Correct.
see.
Mhm.
And when were you elected to that, Tom? It was during apprenticeship or after you turned out?
No, it was after I turned out,
After you
yeah,
turned
because you
out.
had to be a journeyman
Yeah.
to serve on the board. If I remember, I'm thinking it was in 1970 or 69 or somewhere. Anyway, it was during the time that I was on these jobs, but one of these jobs, I'm thinking it was 69 maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I was elected to the first elected position that I held in the local was that position,
Right.
the examining board.
And so you had completed a significant number of jobs at that
Right.
point.
Yeah.
You had been
Right.
worked at the Holy Family. You had worked at Westminster. You
Right.
had worked at the stadium. You had worked at Cobb General Hospital
Right.
by the time
Right.
that you were elected to that
Right.
board. So you had a lot of direct experience.
Exactly.
And a variety of different
Right.
experiences.
And when I left the Cobb General Hospital, Lorne Company, I've been with them a long time, longer than any company that I'd worked with. And they wanted me to go to General Motors out at Doraville to do a little project out there. So I did. I went out there and did it. It didn't last very long. Lasted about probably 4 or 5 months or something like that. But anyway, there was a person, that was a friend of mine. He recommended me to do a job. It was a company called Natkin. And a Natkin company, they were out of California and from out in the West. And they came in here and set up office here. And so J.T. Summerlin, he recommended, he knew the project manager for this, and he recommended that I do the North Side Addition High School. And so I left Lorne and went to work for Natkin Company, and the project that I had was the North Side High School. And so that was, I'm thinking sometime after that. But anyway, I finished that job up, did the additions, a big addition of that high school, and finished that job up. And then after that, Natkin didn't have any more work, so I went to work. And by the way, while I was during that work period there, the next office that I ran for was the Finance Secretary Treasurer in 1969. While I was at that, I'm sure I was at that school then. So I ran for that job, and as I spoke earlier, that there was a man that had that job for many, many years, Virgil B. Harper. And so I decided that I was going to run for the job. And I was told, there's no way you can defeat Virgil Harper. He's a fixture. He'd been there a long time, and and everybody liked him. There's just no way. Well, I wanted to run because even though I was in supervision and I could have stayed in supervision, I could have later, if I had chose, I could have went into business for myself. But I wanted to be in the labor boom. And so I made a decision that I wanted to run for the president, and I took off from work. I took off a month of work and went to every job in this whole area and campaigned for that position. And I got defeated about 40 votes. So then we're beginning to get to the place where we're going to, eventually, we're going to run for the business agent. So let's hold it there just a moment.